Okay, guest speaker today is Andre Crombie. I can't even tell you how excited I am about this. Andre was deputy coordinated campaign director for Florida for the Biden campaign. And so I got to hear him a handful of times over the course of the summer. He was always a highlight. He has a real knack for explaining things in a clear and fun manner. And he's going to talk about why it is we do the things we do in campaigns. Andre, are you in?
Yeah, do y'all have me? Can you hear me?
Yep, there you are. Welcome.
Wonderful. Well, it's fantastic to be here with y'all. This is very exciting. I have a long-standing passion for the local Democratic clubs of Florida. I've been working in Florida for many years, and I'm a Florida native. So it's super exciting. Got my Florida Oranges Biden-Harris hat on. I got my billionaire tears. So I'm super excited. So I'm going to talk really quickly about why we do the things we do. This is a subject we could talk about for several hours. You could teach a class about why we do the things we do and why we what we've learned over the years and how campaigns have evolved over the cycles. But I'm going to try to go through things relatively quickly here. So slide. All right, here's flamingos. Chris knows this. I'm pretty renowned for my my obsession with Florida animals. And so I was in Miami in the 2020 cycle. So I got to spend a lot of time with a lot of strange birds. So the theme of this deck is flamingos, which is very exciting. Next slide, please. So voter contact, this is what we're going to narrow in on, specifically talking to voters, how we do it, who we actually try to talk to, and why we do it the way we do it. Slide, please. So first, who? Slide. Okay, so there's two big picture goals when you're talking about voter contact. And this is very straightforward stuff. I'm sure many of y'all are aware of this, like either implicitly or explicitly, but I'm going to kind of go from the very basics and build on it a little bit. So there's two big picture goals when it comes to voter contact. You're persuading or turning out existing voters to vote for your candidate, or you're finding new voters to vote for your candidate. Very simple. Those are very big things. Those are very big concepts. Those are very big and important and basic ideas. But that's really all voter contact is, right? There's a pool of existing voters. Some of them support you, some of them don't. And there's a pool of potential new voters who you might want to create. So breaking that down a little bit more. So when it comes to existing voters, we do most of our voter contact to what we would call a universe. So on campaigns, when you're knocking doors, when you're making calls, when you're sending texts, the kind of like core bread and butter of doing voter contact on a campaign, you're usually doing it into a modeled universe of supporters. This is a very controversial topic. There's a lot of push and pull here. There's a lot. I have worked on many campaigns, and there's always a little bit of why are we talking to these people and not these other people? And the answer is always really complicated, and you're making these decisions super regularly and super quickly, and you are making adjustments based on feedback you're getting. So my main job on the campaign, in addition to overseeing some of the senior team on the Florida team, my main job on the campaign was thinking about, figuring out, and deciding who we spoke to. So there's a bunch of different factors that go into this, right? So the first is you've got a giant voter file of all Florida voters. You don't have enough capacity to talk to every voter, and you probably wouldn't want to talk to every voter, even if you did have unlimited capacity. So we have to figure out what's the best group of people to talk to. And that's a really complicated question, as it turns out. You can't just talk to all Democrats, right? Because some of those Democrats we know are registered as Democrats, but actually vote for Republicans almost every cycle. The vaunted Dixiecrat is still alive. I'm from Tallahassee, and I can tell you there's plenty of people I went to high school with who they and their parents are registered Democrats, but they are hardcore Trump people, right? That group of people is small, but it still exists. So you can't just call Democrats. The other thing is doing voter contact to turn out a voter, calling me or many of y'all, or like my mom, who vote in every primary, who vote on every local municipal bond issue, who have voted, my mom has voted in every election in Florida since 1980. I voted in every election since I've been eligible. I bet most of y'all have as well. If you have a very limited number of calls and texts and door knocks you can do, it doesn't really make that much sense to engage somebody who you're very, very confident will vote. So you have to take all of these factors into account and turn them into a universe. Once you've created a universe, so on the Biden campaign and the coordinated, we had a support score and a turnout score. We wanted to talk to people who had kind of a medium likelihood to turn out. So somebody who maybe with just 1 or 2 pushes would show up. And then we wanted to talk to people we had a reasonably strong idea would be supporters. What gets complicated, of course, is in PAs, looking at demographics, looking at age, things like that. When we would generate a universe, you have to apply a common sense meter to it, right? If you create a universe of likely Democratic voters in Florida and it's, say, 80% white, you've probably done something wrong, right? Because you're missing all those voters of color who we really need to talk to and really need to engage because they're important part. It's an important part of our coalition. So you have to apply a common sense filter to it. I'll use this cycle as a really specific example. We started getting feedback at a certain point in the campaign that people were talking to a lot of Hispanic voters who said they were voting for Trump. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to look at that, right? One reaction would have been to say, we must be getting the targeting wrong. We're talking to the wrong people. My assumption was actually that we probably were talking to the right people and there were just more Trump support. There was more Trump support among that particular group than what we might expect in a vacuum. So the best path forward was to keep charging forward, collect more data, and figure out how we could better filter and better target. And we eventually did that and were able to process the universe a little bit more so that we could increase the percentage of Democrats we were talking to. We never get it 100% right. It's definitely more of an art than a science, but building those universes, a ton of analytics, expertise, common sense, listening to feedback. We heard tons of feedback from our organizers that were coming up from volunteers. We took all of that into account when we were building the universes of people we were trying to talk to. So slide. I'll try to get through the rest very quickly. I know I can be a little loquacious. So voter registration, whether it's new Americans, young people, former voters, people who've kind of fallen off the rolls, people who were registered in their old state but haven't re-registered in their new state, folks who've been disconnected from the process for whatever reason, who are just disaffected and don't really believe in the process. Voter registration is an incredibly important part of doing any voter contact program. This cycle was really hard because, of course, the way you do voter registration is by sending somebody with a clipboard down to the bus station or the Kmart or the college campus or whatever. And obviously with COVID, first of all, there weren't very many people in those places. And second of all, there was, walking up to a stranger, even if you're wearing a mask and being careful, not exactly the like healthiest or most welcome activity right now. Voter registration is really important, obviously, and is a key part of any voter contact program. Next slide. And then there's another component here that's really important. We will never, ever, ever be able to model a perfect universe of every person we need to talk to. That's why it's really, really important that we go beyond just doing the dialer, doing texting, doing door knocking, and that we try to build in other tactics that will capture people who we maybe otherwise wouldn't speak to. So we often got requests for, hey, we want to talk to the South Asian community in South Florida. And people would say, do you have a list of South Asian voters in South Florida? Well, you don't check that you're South Asian on your voter registration form, right? So it's pretty hard to guess whether what somebody's background is, what their religion is, all these different things. People would ask us for lists of, do you have a list of Muslim voters? And my answer is always, we don't really have good lists built on those specific things. We can give you age. We can give you a very general list of race. We can do party ID. We can do voting patterns. We can do a lot of things, but we can't really do these very specific things. And that's where meeting communities where they're at becomes really important. That's why we go to meetings like this one. That's why we go to meetings of other groups that maybe aren't political at all, like social clubs, things like that, or are political but not partisan, like the NAACP. That's why we focus on coalitions. That's why relational organizing is really important. If you want to talk to a very specific group of voters, whether it's South Asian voters or Muslim voters or Haitian American voters, whatever the group is, the best way to do that is to find the Democrats in those areas and get them to engage their networks, and use that as a sort of spreading mechanism. Spreading isn't the best verb in the days of COVID, but y'all know what I mean. Vote Joe was a really useful tool for this. Reach, which I used on the Warren campaign, which is why I have my Billionaire Tears bottle here, was a really useful tool for this. Good old-fashioned face-to-face interaction is a good tool for this. This is just plain old community organizing. These apps can be helpful, but ultimately this is an important part of our program that we haven't quite figured out how to scale up yet. Which is something that's really exciting on campaigns and is going to keep happening, is scaling up that relational organizing and getting these apps into the hands of more and more people. Next slide. Okay, so how? Next slide. This one will be really quick. Y'all are familiar with this because y'all are awesome activists and organizers in your own community. There's a huge number of voter contact tactics, but phone calls are great. Obviously, dialers have a huge efficiency gain. I know they can be kind of frustrating. I used dialers back when they were first starting to be used, and they were much worse than they are now. But they can be a little frustrating. But even with those frustrations, even this cycle, when we had some overload issues because everyone was using the dialer in the country and we would occasionally break it, it's still vastly more efficient on a conversations per hour basis. Texting, whether it's peer-to-peer, SMS, short code, high traffic canvassing and clipboarding, email, door knocks, events, face-to-face relational. There's a whole host of things. Next slide. And I think a couple of things that are really important. It's really important to have an all of the above strategy whenever possible. Digital contacts are awesome, but face-to-face is necessary and important if it's safe and if it's scalable. Persuasion is hard over the phone. It's really hard over text. And it's much easier in person, as I'm sure y'all have experienced, having persuasion conversations both on campaigns and in real life. And multimodal touches are more likely to increase turnout. And what I mean by that is, if you can call someone 3 times and have 3 conversations with them over the phone, that's awesome. But it's even more awesome to have 1 phone conversation, 1 door knock, and 1 text conversation with them. Those are doing things from multiple avenues. That's why we have TV ads and digital ads, and we do all of these modes at the same time, because the science says that the more types of contacts we have, the better. Next slide, and I think it's the next slide also. So why do we do all this stuff? The answer is pretty complicated, but the simple version is that the science says we should do it. So the Analyst Institute, which is an awesome progressive group that works on data and analytics and looks at the efficacy of campaign tactics, has found over and over again that voter contact is effective. Political scientists have found it's effective. There's always these like hot take Vox.com articles, and sometimes they're like, canvassing is good, and sometimes they're like, voter contact doesn't do anything. And if you really dig into the bones of those articles, they're basically saying the same thing, which is that the impacts are small. Like they're not magic, but elections are not decided by huge numbers of votes, right? Donald Trump almost won this election via 20,000 votes in 3 states. And Hillary Clinton lost by a similar margin in 2016 in 3 states. So small impacts are actually very useful in campaigns. The other thing is that scripts are really important. The stuff we train volunteers to do, making a plan to vote, using social pressure, saying everybody in your neighborhood's voting, or turnout's going to be really high, having those high quality conversations. We don't do it because we like inflicting those trainings on y'all. In fact, I would love to not have to do them. But every cycle we learn more and more about those conversations and about how useful they are. And we want to make sure that every conversation we're having is backed up by this works. We have shown that it works. We've shown that it works in Florida. We've shown that it works on turning out Democratic voters, and making a plan and social pressure are 2 of the biggest things that we've learned over the years that are really, really important. Next slide. It's especially important. Organizing is especially important in close races. You can in fact knock your way to victory when the margin is, say, 537 votes, which is a number I just pulled off the top of my head and has nothing to do with a disastrous election that happened 20 years ago. Next slide. Organizing can also be decisive in races that are a little less close. So in Florida in 2012, which was an election very near and dear to my heart, we won by 0.88%, and that's about 70,000 votes, and that's a field margin. The year and a half, I was organizing in that cycle for 18 months, and I'm sure many of y'all were too. Those 18 months paid off, and we're able to make the difference in flipping the state. The last time we did it at that level. Next slide. Here's the thing, though. Organizing is not magic. So here's an example. West Virginia. Donald Trump won West Virginia in 2020 by 40 points, which is about 300,000 votes in West Virginia. We could have run the best organizing program ever. We could have knocked on every West Virginian's door 3 times. And registered a bazillion voters and turned out a bunch of people and done a million other things. It would not have won this election for Joe Biden in West Virginia. And I say that as a great believer in organizing and someone who's dedicated like their entire adult life to the craft. It's okay that wouldn't happen, right? It's okay that organizing's not magic. We lost this most recent election in Florida by 370,000 votes statewide. If we had knocked on more doors or made different phone calls, or there's any number of like small tactical things we could have changed in that last 3 or 4 months, and many of them probably would have improved the margin. But 370,000 votes is what I would call a structural or like big picture margin that needs more than just tactics to resolve it. Next slide. And that's kind of my last thing here. We have to do balance. We have to have balance in all things. So long-term organizing, awesome TV and digital ads, they still have impact. They still work. Earned media, mail, strong, easy to understand messages. One of the things I really liked about the Biden campaign is that it was really straightforward. It's like, we're going to fix COVID and we are going to like give you jobs, right? In 2012, it was Mitt Romney wants to undo all the progress we've made. Barack Obama, you know, the Joe Biden's joke, Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. Very simple, easy to understand message that was very effective. Big structural change. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of big structural change. I'm wearing my Elizabeth Warren shirt. But big structural changes at a societal and demographic level can't be overcome with 4 months of hard work as a general rule, right? We saw a really interesting pattern in 2020 where Hispanic and Latino voters across the country, not just in Florida, shifted to Donald Trump by a not insignificant amount. It wasn't huge. It's not like it was like a 20-point shift, but it was a handful of points. And that's really important and useful information. It's something we're going to have to think about, and it's not something we're going to fix in 2 minutes. And it's not something that we even necessarily have control over. So we need to figure out how to fix those things, how to improve our messages, how to improve our image. You know, one of the things everyone always points out is that in Florida, 60% of people voted to legalize marijuana, and then 60% of people voted to increase the minimum wage. But many people didn't. Many people continued to. Many of those people also voted for Donald Trump in both of the 16 and 20 cycles. We're not going to win every single one of those people. There is no world in which everyone who believes that the minimum wage should increase is going to vote for a Democrat. That's like hard to wrap your brain around. Like, why wouldn't you vote for Democrats? It's like crazy. But it's the truth, right? We're not going to win Florida by 10 points. But if we can win 1/50th of that group, that's enough to make a difference and enough to help push us over the edge. And that's something we have to keep thinking about. The other thing is that plain old dumb luck is never to be underestimated. Barack Obama in 2004, his first opponent in the primary got taken down by a sex scandal. His opponent in the general also got taken down by a sex scandal. And then they nominated a right-wing nut job who wasn't from Illinois to go against him. And he won by 50 points. And Barack Obama himself will admit that race was like pretty easy. But he got a lot of credit, right? He won Illinois. He won all the counties down ballot. And it created this narrative that like he has a special connection to voters. And that's true. But also he got pretty lucky. And he admits that himself. If you haven't read his memoir, it's pretty awesome. And he talks about that race specifically. So dumb luck is very important. And sometimes it's as hard as it is to admit, sometimes you have to recognize that you don't have control over everything and take advantage of luck when you have it and try to fight through the days of bad luck. Next slide. All right, so anyway, keep organizing, keep working hard, and we're going to win. We can rebuild in Florida. I know that 2020 wasn't what we wanted. We didn't win as many local races as we wanted to. We did not win statewide, which is really disappointing. But I really believe that Florida continues to be a battleground state. The like death of, oh, Florida's a red state now, I think is very, very overrated. And I think we have a path forward to do really well in the midterms and also to do well in the 2024 campaigns. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of thought. It's going to take some hard navel gazing, but I think we can do it. So I'm sorry, I probably went over my time. I always go over my time. It happens every single time. I'll put my email in the chat box in case anybody wants to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions or whatever. But Chris, thank you so much for inviting me. It has been an absolute pleasure to be here. I love hearing about all the work y'all are doing and the things you're thinking about. And the fact that y'all are organizing at a local level and engaging on those issues is so important because as we know, Joe Biden can be president for 4 years or 8 years, and that's awesome. But if our mayors and county commissioners and city commissioners and dog catchers and agriculture commissioners are not also doing good work, we're not going to make the progress we need. So really appreciate it. Thanks very much, everyone. And have a wonderful rest of your meeting. And I'll be here and I questions in the chat box, which I'll get to.
Andre, thank you so much. I now see why we would get so excited when we knew that Andre was coming to talk to us. Just a wealth of really important information that he has a knack for making it really, really, really understandable. You guys hear me talk about this month after month after month. And again, the old joke, do you belong to an organized political party? No, I'm a Democrat. We need to work together. I cannot say this enough times. You have me this month, you have me next month, and I hope that one of you starts carrying around a sign saying we all need to work together. When we don't do that, when we divide our resources and we don't share the information that we glean, we cause actual harm to what we're trying to accomplish. So we took our couple of weeks off after the election. We're all rested, but we have more elections coming, and we have some local people to hold accountable for their votes. Andre, thank you. Adore you. When I grow up, I'm going to be Andre Crombie.